I am so thrilled today that we have Sande Hart with us. She is the author of this wonderful book called The Liminal Odyssey, The Alchemical Power of the Spaces in Between. I've been reading this. I've been just kind of really going through all of these same experiences that she talks about and looking for my angels after hearing and reading about her book. And we're both originally from, lived and grew up in and had our kids and everything in Orange County, California. So this is such a treat for me. Let me just tell a little teeny bit about her. Beside her being the author, Sande is also an award-winning leader in the field of women's empowerment, which is very close to my heart, and interfaith community building. And she has really been the founder of this Women's Interfaith International Grassroots organization called Sarah. And she's done so many other things. I just want you to tell us a little bit about Sarah and the other things that you've been doing.
Well, thank you, Mari. I'm delighted to be here. And let me just say thank you for having me. Sarah has been really a lifeline for me. Sarah started after the events of 9/11, and I answered the call. I heard Gather Women that moment that we saw that we were under attack. And yet I was coming from such an innate curiosity. Not so much about who I was hearing this from, because I was the director of sales and marketing for a major home builder. I wasn't spiritually inclined, or at least that I knew of. Right. And I grew up, not that way either. And, I didn't grow up in a spiritually inclined family. I grew up in Palos Verdes and made my way to Orange County, like you said, and was just kind of living a trance life, just going through the motions, and had this charmed life. I wouldn't give that up for the world, and this beautiful family. Yet when 9/11 happened, it completely changed my DNA. I completely became rewired in that one moment of when we were all watching what we were seeing on television that morning, and this call to action to gather women. And long story, but I ultimately found the women to gather, and it wasn't long, and it'll be 20 years this coming September, or August, that 12 of us met in my living room. And now we're near a couple thousand Sarah Sisters strong, and we're the world's largest women's interfaith organization in the world. And so we just done that by listening carefully and responding spontaneously when necessary, being in that kind of mother nurturing place for the community. We were the first to be called on when our county was in trouble. When a Sikh Gurdwara in Wisconsin was attacked, we were on the porch with candles at the Gurdwara in Buena Park, or AME Church in Irvine, or where, whoever, or a synagogue, or anywhere we were, a mosque especially, we were showing up in droves to support our Muslim community family members. And yet that experience and those relationships and that sisterhood gave me the confidence and the courage to do everything I've done since then, up until right now. So I can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah. So tell us the inception of this wonderful book. Tell us about that, and the title and what that means to you. Okay.
Yeah, I really set out to tell a completely different story. I set out to tell a story about this experience. It actually became chapter 1, but I thought this was what my book was about. This moment in 1982, or I should say a full day in 1982, at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena with 100,000 people who all gathered for the Peace Sunday, No Nukes rally and music festival.
Yeah.
And it was this wild story that I've been urged to tell for decades by my friends. And I kept putting the book down because I just didn't have enough of a story to write. You have to fill up the pages, right? And I decided to pick this book up again and try to start writing again about a year and a half ago. And at the same time, I had just learned this word liminal, which is such a clunky word to say, but it rolls right off your tongue. And liminal means threshold. liminal is the space between crisis and action, dilemma and choice. But
Mm.
it's also between moments in our life when there's change, or moments in their life when there is invitations that we might miss as invitations. So what liminal really I learned it to mean was this space, but what I came to discover is that space is voluminous, is juicy, is really fraught with discovery and disclosure about not only who we are, but what our potential is. And so as I started applying this understanding of the space in between, I started thinking, well, what was going on inside of me that morning at Peace Sunday that ended up to be this interesting story?
About the dog. Yeah.
What about the dog? Everyone wants to know, what about the dog?
I couldn't wait to hear when you said Bette Midler finally said what happened with the dog. I'm a dog person. Yeah.
I know, right? And here we were all there for nuclear nonproliferation, and everyone was concerned about the humanity of this dog. And yet and I can tell this story.
Yeah, tell the story, because they don't know what we're talking about.
I know. I'm kind of hopping around, zigging and zagging like our life often does.
Right.
But before I do, I think it's really important to know that as I started to write the story about what was going on inside of me in that moment, it just opened my whole field of vision of all these other stories that were synchronistic and equally interesting that I would have otherwise dismissed as mundane. So here's the story.
Okay.
About 10 o'clock in the morning, right before the concert and festival really got started, the MC came to the microphone and said, "Hey, we just got a report from the parking lot, and that somebody had left their dog in the car. And if that's your dog, will you please go roll your windows down? It's going to be a very hot day." And there was this low grade boo over the crowd. And then a speaker came to the microphone, an environmentalist, political activist. In this case, I think it was actually Reverend Jesse Jackson, as I tell the story, who came to give the opening kind of invocation, the opening blessing for our day together. But I couldn't think of anything but the dog. So when Reverend Jesse was walking away from the microphone and the first band was taking to the stage, I started chanting, "What about the dog? What about the dog? Surely they'll hear me. I'm, there's only 100,000 people here making a lot of noise, but if I chant, and if I'm relentless and persistent and consistent, I'll get my answer." And I soon got drowned out by the band. But when the band was breaking down and the next speaker, politician, celebrity, thought leader, environmentalist, whoever it was coming to the microphone, I started up again, but now my friends started with me. And the pattern kind of went on like this until our whole section was chanting, "What about the dog?" And by, I think it was noon, maybe 1 o'clock, the entire stadium was chanting, "What about the dog?"
Yeah. Because that's the humanity too, the collective humanity.
That's right. There was something that inspired the humanity of all these people.
Right.
To care about the single dog, while we're all there to protect and preserve all that we consider sacred on our planet, and disband nuclear arms and proliferation. Everyone there was really concerned about the dog. And that went on until about 7 o'clock at night. And again, anytime there was silence from the stage, somebody somewhere started it up, and there it went again. "What about the dog?"
Yeah.
And then you're right. We heard from the stage. So you want to know about the dog. The dog is fine. And there was I think
it was a relief, I'm sure, for everybody that the dog was fine.
Yeah, I don't think anybody got as big a round of applause and cheers and trash and things flying in the air than finding out the dog was okay, whether or not they ever found out. But yeah, so that was that was a story worth telling, but I really had to stop and think what was going on inside of me what was going on in my body. And that was reverent listening. That was paying attention to my body. These were all things I wasn't aware of at the time, but I can look back at all these other stories that, kind of flooded out of me. And I could see that there were other skills that I was practicing, body awareness, mindfulness, understanding, the importance of unpacking intergenerational ancestral trauma.
Yeah.
The stuff that weighs us down is important to unpack right now, especially right now.
And you talk about listening to yourself and really listening in, and you did. You listened to your intuition to yell out, "What about the dog?" And that is, so many people hear something and they don't do anything about it. They just sit there and it's inside them and they don't say. And I think that's what's so beautiful about really expressing that inner voice, or that voice from the angels telling you, or whatever the intuition is, to just go for it. And I think a lot of people now are kind of afraid to do that. They're afraid of what the ramifications of social networking are going to be, who's going to say something. I know even me, I'll say something and people will, kind of, give me a hard time, and I'll just keep in my mediative tone. We all have our own opinions. We see it this way. And I think a lot of people are afraid of the backlash of what will happen. And so it's beautiful because you've got your voice and you listen to your voice, and you have continually, even when you started Sarah, like you had to do it, right?
I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice in 1982. I didn't have a choice in 2001. And I don't have a choice now to speak up about certain injustices that are just unacceptable. And, Mari, I think that every single one of us comes here with an assignment, with something special to contribute to this planet. And I think there's been thousands and thousands of, I'm not alone in this. This is, an entire field of thought that, we've been operating in a condition of domination, especially women, since the Middle Ages, if not before then, since the agrarian age, where we learned to commoditize our earth and become separate from the planet. And then to believe that we have to, adhere to certain restrictions. I think laws are really important, and lines in the sand are good. But it's actually gone way too far that we discount our own genius. And you mentioned fear. There's a quote that I have in the book, and it's very sparkly and, and sounds lovely, yet it might sound a little too, frivolous, but it really isn't. That fear will paralyze our genius, but love will set it free.
Yes.
And we can't be in fear and find creative solutions at the same time.
Right.
So there's something to be said if you're worried about what someone else has to say. Either it's really important and your voice really matters, or maybe you have to rethink this, and not to the point of questioning your confidence or your integrity. But if you are in your integrity, it's critical that your voice be heard at the expense of maybe having somebody around you that doesn't think it's a good idea. I think
I'm looking at Liz Cheney. I've been watching, the hearings, and seeing how Liz Cheney obviously is getting such a backlash from her fellow Republicans, and how, I think she probably will lose in her election. And yet she goes forth with dignity. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you've got to honor this person who is doing what she thinks is right for our country, to bring out what the evidence that she's bringing out, that whatever happens with that evidence is beyond her control. But she's doing what she believes she has to, even when so many of her male counterparts are afraid to really look at the evidence even.
Right.
So, I mean, it seems to me like there's a lot of women now that are coming out and being truthful and being open and not, feeling the fear and doing it anyway, like the name of that book, right? Just feel the fear and do it anyway.
Absolutely. And, fear is there for our survival. It's
Yes.
there just built into who we are as the human animal.
Yeah.
But fear is usually a lot, smaller than the big hairy monster we may make it out to be.
Right.
And I love this one little practice of whying yourself out of fear. Well, why is that? Why is that fearful? What am I afraid of? Well,
Right.
if this will happen. Well, why is that so important? Why am I surrounding myself with people who wouldn't agree with me?
Right.
Why, if this is totally in my integrity and important and good for the greater good?
Yes. Yes.
And so you get it down to something bite-sized. I use the expression of zebras in the Serengeti in my book as looking as one big massive, animal to a lion. But as soon as one's singled out, it's bite-sized.
Right.
Yeah.
And it helps when you're in fear to breathe into it and do some of that meditation and kind of get between the space of your breath as well. That place where you can go from your, amygdala, your fight flight back to your frontal lobes and say, you know what, fear is, as they say, false expectation appearing real. That's the acronym. But I want to get into your book because we could probably talk for ages about everything like this. But I want to talk about, you have really 12 skills that you talk about, and you go through giving your own experiences, and then you apply the skill in each chapter, which I love. I just love that. I thought, to give kind of an appetizer to people who will want to read this, because I think especially women wanting to read this, men too, but I think women really need to read this book. So let's talk about the 12 skills, if you don't mind. Give us a little overview of first, you have the sacred art of listening. Kind of give us a little bit of what you mean by that.
The sacred art of listening was taught to me by Reverend Kay Lindahl, and she is an expert in this field. And Kay doesn't talk about the act of listening as much as preparing to listen. And there's a beautiful quote that she gave me by Douglas Steer that says that to listen someone into a condition of to listen to someone holy is to listen to them into a condition of discovery and disclosure may be the greatest gift that one human being may perform for another. Imagine if we do that, have that same condition of discovery and disclosure because we listen to ourselves.
Yes.
How often do we discount who we are in the equation? What is our body telling us? What are the signs? This requires really slowing down to the speed of awe and wonder about what's going on inside of us. And are we really listening? These are fantastic skills to practice, to listen to another. Absolutely. And my children are very happy about that because I wasn't always a very good listener. I'm still practicing. But skill, it's a practice. Every one of these skills are practices and they all have to align with who you are.
You had a beautiful quote in the book that listening is love.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And people want to be heard, right? They want to be heard. And that's how we connect when we listen. For me as a mediator, an attorney mediator for 35 years now, I have to listen and I have to practice that so I can hear not only the words that they're saying, but the intention behind it and the fear or whatever it is. I have to listen to the body language and all that. And my own, like you were talking about, when I meditate and I hear these stupid thoughts that come up, when I meditate, I have to let them go. I have to let them go. I have to be aware and then let them go. So you're so right about listening to yourself and listening to the people you're with. And that's love for yourself and love for others. So I think it's terrific.
And I don't let anyone I love call themselves stupid or any thoughts they have stupid. So
I know, but dumb things will come up when you're meditating. I don't know if it's from when it comes from, but I say to I have to laugh at them sometimes and say, what are you thinking? Some dumb thought will come up that has no meaning at all. And I'll go, oh my goodness, let that go. Get back to your mantra, get back to just letting go, So,
and that's where that thought appears. It's a practice to remind it to let it go. Our minds are supposed to think. We're not supposed to be thoughtless in meditation.
Right. Yeah.
We're just supposed to be aware.
Right.
And those thoughts, okay, off you go. You don't serve me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. Then you talk about timefulness. Now that's a word that you kind of coined, right?
I did.
Tell us about what timefulness is as opposed to timeliness.
Yeah. Timefulness is, you're right. I coined this word because I couldn't find a better word out there to describe this place, the place of liminality, the place of spaciousness. To be timeful means to really take the time in what's known as Kairos time. There's Chronos time, the time on the clock. We know this measurement of time. But Kairos time is known as, by Aristotle, he said, Kairos time is the time in which the truth will be discovered. So timefulness is understanding that we can be thoughtful, mindful, careful in the spaces in between. And it's
aware goes back to that word you used before, that awareness. We are often just on a program, you know what I mean? We just do things without even thinking, our habits and things like that. And we're not really engaged in the timefulness. So I thought that was just beautiful that you said that. And it reminded me that, when I'm in traffic, I have to not just be, just whatever. I have to really be looking around. I have to pay attention. I have to see, what am I feeling? Am I feeling all tense because it's terrible traffic or the rain is coming down or whatever? Just to really be, like you said, mindful, aware in the moment. And that seemed to me what you were talking about with timefulness, right?
Right. And timefulness is required for the sacred art of listening. And so all of the 12 skills are all interdependent and all interrelated and work as a unit. Therein lies the philosophy of the Liminal Odyssey. So as you go through all the skills, you'll see they all rely on one another to be present for us. And when we practice them, they just become second nature. Yes.
And it's a practice. It's paying attention to all that. The next one I love that is very much involved in conflict resolution, which is my expertise, and that is forgiveness, sacrifice, and bliss. So those are interrelated, but they're different. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I first have to say that so much of this book, if not all of it, unfolded as I was writing it, or I say it wrote me. And I knew that forgiveness was something I had to write about because I was telling this story where forgiveness was necessary. And what it felt like for me to really, for the first time, really grasp forgiveness. It's easy to say forgiveness, but it's another thing to really grok it, really feel it completely. And because it's not something I personally can will. And and then, I was sort of living by, well, you can forgive, but you don't forget. But that wasn't working for me.
Mm,
Because if I'm not forgetting it, I'm still carrying some of that baggage that I needed to forgive. And I was
mm.
talking to a friend of mine about this, Clay Boykin, who is the founder of Circles of Men. And we were talking about this. I don't know how it came up. And he says, well, Sandy, forgiveness isn't reconciliation. It's about alchemizing. It's about
Mm.
alchemizing what happened and seeing seeing the blessing of what happened and honoring it. And because what happened, and if it's something to be forgiven, it obviously must have hurt.
You were talking about a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really got vulnerable here in a couple of these chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't expect to tell that story, but it had to be told. I didn't have a choice, and so these things that hurt so much, in this case, pain that I was carrying for 30 years, that
Yes.
I wasn't even aware of it entirely until I learned the forgiveness. I saw through the forgiveness portal, I should say,
Right.
that it's that what happened is part of the fiber of who I am. It makes up all my beautiful parts. I should honor it. It helped me learn lessons. It helped me with discernment and helped me see the absolute gratitude that I can have and the blessing even more so in my husband that I have today. And I have for 36 years. So yeah, it's pretty remarkable how transformational that writing that chapter was for me. And I'm a hard one to forgive. I'm still learning all these things myself, and I'm still practicing them. But that transformed for me in a hot second.
Yeah. I know forgiveness has been a big issue for me in my life and with my clients. And I wrote about it in my last book as well. And what I came to realize was that forgiveness, you don't forgive for someone else, you give so that you're unshackled, because if you don't forgive, you're still tied to that. It still comes back. When you remember without that emotion of anger or hurt or regret, then it's wisdom. So, right? So forgiveness leads you to wisdom and also sets you free.
Yeah.
So, it took a lot for me to forgive my ex-husband. And when I finally did, it was like this elephant came off my back. And so I realized, wow, this is really about me releasing it. And I can remember the things, but I don't have the trigger anymore. There's no trigger. It's like, wow, I learned from that. Like you learned. It's the wisdom that you get from forgiveness that is so powerful, I think. So it's just another way to look at it, right? So
yeah, I think everybody can find their way with some of these models, right? And that's a beautiful one. And unshackling, just the vision, unshackling every one of these skills. And perhaps the overall intention of the book might even be to prepare us to be who we are meant to be, who we get to be, who we have the privilege of being.
Or to remember who we were before we got here.
All right, now you're talking. Okay, let's go.
It could even be that, to remember who we really are, who is our soul besides our ego, maybe to get, beyond our ego and to really know what our purpose is in life. It gets a little esoteric, but you could go with it in any way you want. But so you were talking about sacrifice and you were explaining how that is sacred. So tell a little bit about sacrifice.
Well, I point out, I speak a lot about Joseph Campbell in this book, who popularized the hero's journey. And because I really thought I was framing the book around the hero's journey originally. And then it just wasn't hitting the mark for me. And it wasn't a journey, it was an odyssey.
Right.
And yet sacrifice is really about, and it's not really sacrifice as we understand the word sacrifice to mean, but if you look
Yeah.
at mythological stories
Mhm.
about those who gave their life because it meant eternal, heroism for them, to
Right.
be remembered in that way. When we sacrifice something of ourselves, we're sacrificing those things that actually do not serve us.
Mhm.
And that further prepares us for midwifing the unknown place that's calling us right now. We've got to be in our absolute integrity. And that means, you know, emptying as much luggage as we can, because it's going to be expensive, and recognizing that perhaps you're sacrificing something that wasn't of value to you anyway.
Right. Gets back to letting go.
And non-attachment, that's
Yeah.
hard for me. I'm still practicing that one,
Yeah.
I yeah, yeah.
It's a tough one for me too. I really relate. So, I don't let go very easily.
I
That's
think
probably
I've
one
learned
of
in
my things
love.
is persevering even when I shouldn't persevere. I
And Marie,
remember when
consciously,
I when
I'm
I
sorry.
didn't when I didn't want to give up on my marriage, of 18 years, many, many years ago. And my brother-in-law at the time told me I would have been a great Cubs fan from Chicago. They never give up, that's what he said I would have been. So I thought that was funny, but I finally, when you can let go and not be attached to what you think your life should be, and then just listen to the small voice within you that knows more than you do, more than your ego knows, what your soul purpose is, which you talk about going for that. And then you talk about, and we don't have a lot of time, but I want to get to bliss, because that was really another one that goes along with the forgiveness and the sacrifice. Then there's bliss. And so just speak to that, and then we aren't going to be able to get through all of it, so they have to get your book.
I think bliss is our true nature. Bliss is how we feel when we're dancing freely. Bliss is how we feel when we are in the zone and we are showing up in our authentic selves. Bliss is where we feel light as air, and that's a sign to pay attention to. That means we're in alignment. Our mind, body, spirit, our soul is smiling because our soul is being heard for perhaps the first time in its life.
Yeah.
Because the soul came here to release us, but in between, show up in our divine assignment.
Yeah.
What is your divine assignment? Where do your passions meet the needs of the world? Where do you dance freely? Where are you in the zone? That's bliss. Please go follow your bliss. Ultimately, that's what this is about.
Yes.
And being a spiritual activist means operating in enlightened self-interest, which means when you're showing up for yourself, you're showing up for the world. And when you show up for the world in a way that's in your integrity, with your voice, that's your voice alone, where you don't have a choice, you're showing up for yourself. So it's reciprocity, it's sacred reciprocity. It's critical for our liminal life.
Yeah, I love that. When you show up for yourself and you really do it from your core, you're really helping the whole universe. And that's what's beautiful. So I want to mention your book again. I love it. Love it. The Liminal Odyssey, more than a journey. It's an odyssey. And it is the beautiful alchemical power of the spaces in between. And so I think many of us go through many times in our lives that we're in that space in between. And then if we can just go with it to find where we're really supposed to go. So thank you for writing this book. It is beautiful, Sande Hart. And where, first of all, tell us your website and where we can get the book.
Thank you, Mari. The website is the Liminal Odyssey, or liminalodyssey.com. And if you purchase the book from the website, I have a special promo code for you, and that's Mari, that's hard to forget. And just put in Mari and you get free shipping and a little discount. And of course, it's also on Amazon and other places, the Barnes and Noble and other places that you can, search for the book online.
And you talk about Sarah on your website also. So if people want to get involved with Sarah, that's another opportunity. So thank you so much. It's so delightful to be able to speak to you and share your book. And I'm going to finish it. I love it. So thank you so much. And I hope that we can have you back again, maybe with your next book, Sande. Okay.
Thank you, Mari.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Okay. Thank you.
It was really a delight. Thank you, Mari.
Okay.